Thank you very much for the warm welcome, and thank you, all of you, for coming along this evening. I've been invited, I had a look at the website before I came out this evening, to speak about the significant role that Codebase Sterling is playing in the tech ecosystem. Unfortunately, I'm not always terribly good at sticking to briefs, so hopefully I will talk about something like that as I go along. But if I don't, please feel free to tell me afterwards. I wanted to... I think I wanted to. I wanted to start just by acknowledging something. There's quite an important date this week, which is this coming Friday, 8th of March, which is International Women's Day. And it feels, amongst other things, appropriate to be here and talking about the things that we are here to talk about in the same week as International Women's Day. In particular, because the theme for International Women's Day in 2024 is Inspire Inclusion. Very familiar words to people who are involved in Novate and Novate Hub. I often spend a lot of time, perhaps too much time, thinking about language, about the meaning of words, the use of words, and inspire, inclusion, include, and inspire. We recognize these as powerful, affirmative words which speak to the potential for transformative change if we do inspire and we do include. But their use and the need for their use in this context speaks also to a gap, to the spaces in which we as an ecosystem or a society more widely do not include and do not inspire. I'm probably telling you things that you already know, but it's worth setting what follows into a little bit of context. And that context in the week of International Women's Day is that despite the fact that more than half of Scotland's population are female, currently only 1 in 5 of Scottish entrepreneurs are women, while startups founded by women in Scotland receive only 2% of overall investment capital. And this is despite copious evidence, if any were really even needed, that the entrepreneurial capabilities of women are equal or quite often greater than those of many men. This gap is what happens when we do not inspire and do not include. We suffer an enormous loss of talent from our startup economy and a denial of opportunity on literally an industrial scale. At the same time, the loss or this lack of inclusion or inspiration presents a compelling case for Scotland to better leverage this untapped pool of talent, drive and grow the entrepreneurial economy. Furthermore, as the executive summary to the Independent Pathways Review into Women in Entrepreneurship, written by Anna Stewart and Mark Logan, notes, many of the root cause issues affecting entrepreneurial underparticipation as regards gender also affect other underrepresented groups. The same report acknowledges that this participation rate has remained more or less constant over many decades. Despite many prior reports on the topics having been produced and many positive initiatives being put in place, structural progress has been stubbornly slow. So, what are we doing as Codebase, as TechScaler here in Stirling and nationally under the joint banners of Codebase and the Scottish Government's TechScaler programme? In the face of these familiar truths which reports like Anna Stewart's reveal, but which have been hiding in plain sight for many years. Before I go on for too much longer, I'm going to try and talk about 3 things which I think are important that we are doing and that will hopefully help to some extent to address this position and get us to a better place. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the National TechScaler program that Monique has already mentioned, which our Codebase team here in Stirling, led by Anigne deliver across central Scotland and the Forth Valley region. So far, we've recruited 73 member businesses to TechScaler in central Scotland. And the reasons I believe that we've been able to recruit them, the things that they joined the program looking for, broadly speaking, fall under three main pillars, which are education, mentorship, and community. Before I dive into these in more detail, it's probably worth saying, just briefly, a bit of context about TechScaler as a whole, what the idea is and what it's for. So TechScaler is intended to be a national backbone for tech-based entrepreneurship in Scotland. It's designed to be a center of gravity that pulls different parts of an ecosystem and to some extent different regional ecosystems together. It's intended to support interconnectedness. It's intended to make the business journey from ideation to scale more straightforward, easier to understand, more accessible, more available, and more open. To date, we have 643 founders from 517 companies across Scotland who have joined TechScaler. 36% of our founder applicants identify as female, 36.3% identify as non-white European, which you'll know compares reasonably well to the proportions in the Scottish population as a whole. 369 of our founders have enrolled in one of our education programs. 304 are receiving mentorship through the program. And from the information available to us on our members' funding rounds, we understand that companies participating in TechScaler have raised 45.7 million in funding since they joined, with the total lifetime capital raised by our members currently sitting at 295 million. So to whatever extent numbers matter, those are our numbers. But what I want to go on to talk about are some of the practical, ground-level things that TechScaler offers. Founders, entrepreneurs like yourselves, that can help address these barriers to access and inclusion. And the first of these headings I mentioned is our education programs. TechScaler offers free, and I always forget to emphasize this, free education courses for founders and entrepreneurs. We call these courses Startup Basics, Startup First Steps, Startup Next Steps, and Reforge. They're aimed across the piece at people at any stage in their startup business journey, from ideation, the very beginning, when you're sitting at a kitchen table with nothing but an idea and no clear path to turning it into a business, to scaled up post-product market fit companies with tens or more of employees. For founders at that later stage, TechScaler grants free access to Reforge, which is an internationally renowned Silicon Valley-based provider of in-depth scale-up education programs led by some of the top executives in global tech. And an initiative that we have recently launched, that we have run for the first time just this last month, from February to March, is what we call our TechScaler Silicon Valley outpost, where we took 12 founders to San Francisco Bay Area, to Silicon Valley for a month. We've provided them with office accommodation, with a base from which to work, and we enabled them to deepen their engagement with contacts, connections, and networks in Silicon Valley. Across the piece, education matters because it can help address barriers to inclusion and opportunity. As the research which underpins reports like Anna Stewart's tells us, pathways into entrepreneurship can often be unclear, while informal pathways and networks are often inaccessible to women and minority groups. Developing an understanding of how to become involved in entrepreneurship and how you successfully navigate its various stages has traditionally required access to informal networks. The old boys clubs, the golf course clubhouses, all of which have traditionally been heavily oriented towards men, principally white men. Formal support, delivered by public sector, by government, and by other institutions, is correspondingly less well organized, disproportionately constraining the ability of women and other underrepresented groups to access support. Our position is that TechScaler can change this picture. by providing organized, free-for-all, accessible courses of education and learning, guiding founders rather than leaving them to have to try and find things out for themselves. The second pillar in our program, which we hope will help build a more diverse and inclusive ecosystem, is our mentorship offering. Again, this is free for founders and senior startup team members, and it's tailored to each founder's background, expertise, and immediate needs. Mentorship, our members tell us, is currently the most attractive offering to founders in all stages of TechScaler. When we ask them for feedback, when we ask them to complete questionnaires about what brought them to the program, mentorship is the answer in the majority of cases. We have a pool of over 100 mentors, experienced startup founders, and active business leaders signed up to work with us. 23% of that pool identify as female presently, and our ambition is to increase this proportion to the same level as the number of female founders among our membership. Mentorship matters because, again, it means that our members do not have to rely on segregated, informal networks in order to move through the various stages of their business journey. They can be guided and given advice by those who've already succeeded in business. Quite often within Codebase, we talk about steps ahead. We talk about being 3 steps ahead, being 30 steps ahead, being 300 steps ahead. And by using these terms, we try and describe the different stages that a founder may be on their business journey, but also where they are in relation to others that they come into contact with in their network. Sometimes it's far more useful to spend time with somebody who is only 3 steps ahead of you, because they will be experiencing problems and challenges that are much closer to your own. Somebody 300 steps ahead may have useful strategic guidance to offer, but the things that they are dealing with at that point in their journey aren't as likely to be the things that you are facing on a day-to-day basis. So we can tailor our mentorship offering to that kind of the idea of where you are in your journey, so you're getting the right kind of advice from somebody with the right kind of experience. Through mentorship, TechScaler members have the opportunity to learn lessons directly from the startup experience of people whose backgrounds and life stories can be closer to their own. Most importantly, this helps address the underlying issue through a lot of accessibility issues, which is what I refer to as the "this isn't for me" challenge. Again, part of the point of TechScaler, part of the idea is across Scotland, nationally, to be able to demonstrate to more and more people that this is for me, that tech and tech-enabled entrepreneurship, startups and business can be as open and accessible to them as to anybody else. Final pillar I mentioned is our community offering, and there's an extent to which this wraps around both our education programs, our mentorship offering, and the TechScaler program as a whole. Now, I probably don't need to tell you community matters, because we know that female and minority ethnic founders are often left with a sense that they somehow don't belong in entrepreneurship, and this can affect their confidence and their self-belief. This leads to a sparsity of founders from different groups in our economy and creates a vicious circle, helping others to conclude that entrepreneurship isn't a natural environment for them either, which further drives this sparsity. Our plan is to leverage all of the other things that we're doing through the TechScaler program in order to build an open, accessible, and supportive community around all of the things that we do for and on behalf of our members. Since we launched TechScaler, we've delivered 499 community events nationally, 45% of which we ran in partnership with other organizations such as Novate Hub and others, and 19% of which have had a specific diversity, equality, and inclusion focus. These events create and curate open, inclusive spaces around Scotland in which members can connect with an ever-widening network of their peers, helping them again to access guidance, advice, and support, but more importantly, helping them to feel that they belong. Now, the reason main reason I'm telling you all of this is to give you a sense of how these pillars, education, mentorship, community, can help us get to a better place in terms of our overall ecosystem. Sorry. And I'd like to finish by saying just a little bit more about how that journey can look and maybe something about how it could feel. So it involves traveling into the future. It involves time travel, for starters, because a Scotland or a Scottish economy or an ecosystem in Scotland where barriers to opportunity and access are fully and completely addressed doesn't exist now. It may exist, but only in the future. When I think about the future in different ways, a couple of things come to mind which I'd like to share with you. First one is a phrase attributed to the author William Gibson. He's a science fiction writer, if any of you have heard of him. And the phrase is, the future is already here. It just isn't evenly distributed yet. Like a lot of similar phrases, it's not actually clear if William Gibson ever actually said or wrote this. But to some extent, I don't think that matters, because I quite like the way these sorts of sayings exist in a kind of quasi-mythic or mysterious way. But it's a good phrase, I think, because it provides both hope and challenge. The future is already here in some parts of Scotland, in some parts of the world, in some places. And this gives us a basis for hope. But the challenge is to distribute it evenly, to enable access and opportunity equally for all. And one of the things I enjoy most about working for Codebase, working for Aninye and the team here with Aninye's counterparts around Scotland and with our other colleagues in the organization, is that I genuinely feel this job offers the opportunity every so often, not every day, but some days. It gives me personally, and hopefully others, a sense of what that future could actually look like. Sometimes this is quite a fleeting glimpse rather than anything concrete or realized. But there have been times in conversations, in meetings, at events like this one, when I can genuinely feel the presence of that future becoming more real, manifesting in a more concrete way in the room. And that's a nice feeling to have in a job. It tends to go away again shortly afterwards, and we crash back a little bit into reality. But working in this organization, working to deliver a program like TechScaler is a genuinely future-facing, future-forward initiative, and that is always exciting, it's always enthusing, it's sometimes frustrating, because the future is a little bit contradictory in that it feels a lot of the time like it's arriving, because it is, in the next minute. But in other instances, it still feels like many things are some distance away, and we have to wait far longer for them than we would like to. Another thing that I sometimes think about when I think about the future, there's a song by David Bowie on an album of his called Heathen, which was released back in 2002, 2003, so 20 years ago. And I have to acknowledge that just saying that this record is 20 years old makes me feel about 80 years old. But in the course of his career, it's obviously one of his more recent albums. But there's a song on that record, it's not a terribly well-known song, but it's called I Demand a Better Future. And as I said, I like words. I'm always interested in the way in which we can use words to convey things and use of language. And I'm always interested in the way that artists and writers use words. And I've always been struck by that demand in that song title. It's not I would like a better future. I can see. It's not imagine. It's I demand. If you happen to have read or read anything from the time in which that record was released, David Bowie mentioned, amongst other things, that he was thinking quite a lot. He had a relatively young daughter called Alexandra, around about that period, late 90s, early 2000s. So there was an extent to which one of the themes that ran through that record was generational. He was singing and writing songs to some extent for his daughter as much as anybody else. One of the key aspects I always feel about future facing and looking future forward is to be mindful of that this is a generational endeavor. It is for generations to come as much as it is for us and ourselves. And I like to think that there's an influence in that phrase. It's not I demand a better future for me. It's I demand a better future for my child, for my family, for others. And I think that really kind of strengthens it. It gives it a sense of purpose that perhaps isn't clear to begin with, but I feel is definitely there. So I demand a future that can be evenly rather than unfairly distributed. On the other side of that, the flip side of that coin, a future that can be fairly distributed will only come, I think, if we are clear about our asks and if we make this our demand. So we, that is Codebase, working on TechScaler here, Codebase working on TechScaler elsewhere, and all of the rest of us involved in the program, essentially are here to try and address and meet your demands, to provide a service to you, to give you the things that you need, help you make the connections that will advance you along your journey, and the journey of other members around Scotland. We intend to include you, and we want to inspire you. And if we are not meeting your demand for those things, if we're not doing the things that you think we should be doing, I hope you will tell us. Evenings like this are only always ever a moment along a continuing conversation, a discourse and an exchange of ideas, a broadening of connections and a sharing of understandings. I hope tonight will be helpful to you all. I hope you'll take useful things from it. Thank you very much for listening to me. It's been lovely to be here and have the chance to speak to you. Thank you.